Hi, again, I'm Laura from Bridgeport PD and detective right here.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, a very powerful speech, by the way. It was like very touching. And I just want to ask you out of curiosity, so when you were able to get out and start, of this position, were you able to go after these guys, like prosecute them? That was
To the guys that did
The traffickers.
to me, no, because when the situation happened and I went into hiding with my grandmother, my grandmother lived on the completely opposite side of town. And she was more afraid that I would be seen or recognized. So she kind of really did a good job at keeping me close and hiding. And once I graduated from high school, I immediately went to Atlanta. I was Spelman. So I was gone for years before coming back. And I still kind of had a fear watching over my shoulder all the time, thinking that I would be recognized or seen. So I carried a lot of fear of being found out or being seen, even long after that was over, because I got out of it at 15 and I went into it right before I turned 12. So it was a few years of that, and being gone and out of it. I just wanted to try to not identify with what it was that I went through, and I almost tried to suppress that and try to figure out what another life would look like for me outside of what I went through, because I didn't want to be identified as just the trafficker. I felt like I earned the right to be something else than an object for someone else's sexual pleasure.
Hi, Kiana. Thank you so much for this, and all that you do is amazing. I've learned so much. So I have a question just for parents. I would want to ask, as a parent, I was a young mom. I identify with a lot of what you said. So as a young mom who dealt with their own trauma, what are some things that some advice you'd give on parenting, I guess, working through trauma that you've experienced, and then also being able to not, be a burden for your kids, or actually groom them. But everything that you said, what are some things that you said to parents, so that they won't actually put their kids in this kind of situation, or help them with their self-esteem as well?
That's a really good question. One of the things that I learned from my mother, right? Trauma gets recycled, especially when it's in family and when it is not addressed. And most of the time, you cannot address anything that you are not made aware of. So constantly being in denial that something has happened doesn't allow you to really talk about it. I try to tell a lot of the parents that I work with to really pay attention to the friend circle, right? Pay attention to body language. Have a kind of open dialogue with your kids, a safe space with your kids. I have a son, and one of the things that I always say is, I don't expect you to be perfect, right? I don't hold those expectations to you. I'm not going to like everything that you do, but I'm always going to be your mother. I will always listen, I will always hear, and your safety is what's really important to me. Even if I can't relate to what you've been through, I can respect what you've been through, and I believe your experience, even if it's different from mine. Be willing to talk about hard things with your kid and sit with the discomfort of what they're experiencing and how they're experiencing this thing called life. I've worked with a lot of parents that don't even consider that their kids would be doing anything that would be labeled promiscuous or something that's questionable. Because again, even with myself, I had straight A's. I did really well academically. So no one really thought, oh, she's going to get into any trouble. No one was asking why I was out very late at night. And who were those girls that you're always hanging around? No one asked those kind of questions. No one met any of the girls either. And those were the people I was surrounded by to be trafficked with, right? But because I did so well academically, they didn't ask questions. And I think building up your child's self-esteem, letting them know that they can talk to you about anything, and then surrounding them with a village. Because sometimes I have kids that don't say anything to their parents, and their parents think they have the absolute closest relationship with them, and they do, but the kids don't want to say that to them. They don't want to tell them everything that's going on. So allow your kids to have a village of other adults that they feel is like, the fun auntie, or, just things like that. And they can have those hard conversations, and then you can have them together. Another thing that I would say is to make sure that you are aware of the location. Be mindful of their social media. I didn't have social media growing up, so social media is everywhere, and what they post, what they share, their location, all of that is really, really important when it comes to kids. And then look at root cause. Pay attention to behavior. Pay attention to language. Always pay attention to young people's language. When they speak negatively about themselves, or when they speak negatively about a situation, that is a mindset. That is a belief system, right? And that requires repetitive action for them to have seeds planted. And now their behavior is reflective of their belief system. So when their behavior is what most people would consider bad, or they would be written off because, they're just not there, they're interrupting the class and all of that, we don't really look at the root cause of that. And we don't really say, what's going on? Why do you think that way? Why are you speaking that way? Why do you feel like you need to act like that? What are you protecting? We don't look into that enough. And I would encourage the parents to look into some of the behaviors to find out why your kids act that way, why they think that way, why do they choose to hang around certain type of friends, why do they feel like they want to fit in, right? The need for being validated, especially when it comes to social media that we have nowadays, the need and desire. We have adults that do that, would do almost anything to feel validated, to feel seen, to feel valuable, like they matter, they don't have the confidence, they feel unworthy. And so what are you willing to do to feel like you're good enough and worthy and validated? And when you have young people, especially middle school, high school age students, they're trying to fit in. They don't really know who they are yet. And at home, if you don't let them know who they are, everybody else that's outside of your household will find a way to tell them who they are that's beneficial to their intentions for them.
Hi, Kiana.
Hi.
My name is Angel.
Oh,
Thank you so much for speaking with us today. I was wondering if you could talk about your healing journey from the trauma you experienced as a child to where you are now as an adult, because I know the stories for a lot of survivors aren't so successful, and they don't get to a point where they can speak openly and honestly like you have with us today. And I'm wondering if you could talk about the support systems you had, or any programs that assisted you, or that journey of healing that you went through.
That took a long time. I'm 42, and I didn't think to get into therapy until I was about 28 or 29 years old. I spent a lot of my 20s still trying to figure out who I was, and I became a workaholic because I felt like I didn't want to be identified by all of the sexual trauma and experiences that I went through. And so it was really important for me to get all of the degrees and to get all of the achievements and the accolades. And I still was looking for validation, but now more into my level of success and my level of education. But it took me going to therapy to realize, because I kept repeating a lot of mistakes. I lived in a lot of fear. Like I said, I was always like looking over my shoulder all the time. And then the things that I was looking for was safety, even with dating. My biggest thing was being safe. One of the things that I think a lot of people don't talk about, and I've talked about this with a lot of the survivors that I work with, in the trafficking department at the YWCA, and with some of the organizations that I work with, is we find a way to recreate some of the things that we experienced in our childhood, but more in our adult life. And so even though I felt like my body wasn't for sale, and I was very firm with that, What I didn't realize that I was doing was making my love transactional, right? And if you love me, if I could just give you my time, or if I could give you the relationship, I didn't value sex. I had to figure out what sex was to me, what intimacy was to me, what consent was to me, because I learned how to suppress and just give whatever somebody wanted so that I could get the love in return, which is still transactional, instead of realizing that I was worthy of love regardless of what I would give to them physically or in any other capacity. And that took a long time, and that was something that kept repeating in my 20s. And I had a therapist tell me, I think that if you don't want to have sex, just say no and see if that sticks. And whoever decides to leave, let them leave. And I was like, wait, what? No, because that's all you've ever known, right? So I started to figure out what my voice looked like, figure out who is Kiana outside of what I have to offer, and the benefits that other people feel like they can get out of me. And therapy was key. And one of the things that I say when it comes to therapists and safe spaces, it took me 5 therapists to find the right one. And when I tell you that relatability key is important, I have trained a group of psychiatrists who have re-traumatized and re-triggered survivors, and 2 of them went back into it because they were shamed or they were judged. And the psychiatrist was actually talking at them clinically versus talking to them as an individual and as a person who's experienced sexual assault. And I've experienced that. I've had some therapists talk at me, and I said, this is not going to work. And it took the fifth therapist, who was really sweet, little Jewish lady from London with a little accent, and she allowed to bring her story into the room. And I felt like, okay, she's relatable. She'll get me. She'll understand me. I'm comfortable with talking about things that are really hard and really difficult with somebody who brought their humanity into the room, right? And that's why I say it's really important when working with survivors to bring that level of relatability, even if it's not the same exact thing. We've all experienced something hard in life. Someone's got to be vulnerable first, right? And it should be us coming into the lives of people that we're trying to help. And that's a very key, valid thing to use. And from there, it was just getting into the habit of saying no, really understanding, I am not what I went through, but it's something that I experienced, right? And that I have more to value than just that. And my value has nothing to do with what I accomplished, but I'm also not identified by what I went through. It's an experience that has made me into the loving, gentle, kind soul that I have. I have a way of, I feel like I tell people all the time, my career is built on loving people until they love themselves, because it took me so long and it took so much work to realize what loving myself really looked like and really felt like outside of absolutely anybody else. And that's a journey, regardless of whatever you experienced in life or not. And I had to recognize my coping mechanisms. I had to recognize what my triggers were. I had to be gentle and kind and compassionate. The dialogue that I used to even talk to myself, I had to unlearn a lot of that mental conditioning and programming from what I experienced and growing up, and then realizing that, my worth is also not dependent on waiting on somebody to say sorry, right? Or waiting for forgiveness from an apology that I might not get. Then learn how to accept that, and then figure out what I want to do and how I want to experience in life now that I have more power over myself.
Hi, Kiana. I'm really pretty loud, so I'm not going to hold this too much. Thank you for sharing your story. My name is Ashley. I founded a grassroots anti-child trafficking nonprofit a few years ago. And what really moved me was when you were talking about the conditioning. I have some children in my program now where I'm trying to work to rewire their reward system. Mm-hmm. So they're in that grooming process where they're being gifted things, mm-hmm. and their definition of love and their love map is very skewed. Could you give any advice community or any other activists on how to help support those children in rewiring their, what motivates them to be happy?
Motivates them to be happy and trying to, I guess, figure out, are you trying to figure out if something is going on with them that they haven't shared yet, or?
Most of them have shared it. But and I don't know if this is something that you can relate to, but a part of them enjoys it because they've been gifted, or they've been given candy, or toys, or a little bit of like a Stockholm syndrome. Like they miss the comfort of the love that they received after the abuse. So as somebody that hasn't experienced that, I don't know how to help them or to inform, their caregivers on how to help them through that. Help them differentiate between what is healthy love and what is unhealthy love.
Yeah, I mean, they're kids, so they don't know. They think that, love is love is candy, right? Love is attention. Kids want love, but they are conditioned to love in the way that it's shown to them, right? And a little bit of just a snippet of story, like with my uncle, with my tio, one of he was the oldest, and I loved him to death. I was 9 years old, right? And a little bit of detail behind that is, he's the one who taught me how to do all these salsa dancing, and how to cook, and how to sing certain songs. And so when he was sober, he was like my favorite person, right? But at nighttime, he was a person that I feared. And I'm going to dive into a little bit of conditioning that I don't think gets talked about a whole lot. And I usually talk about this, especially with my kids behind closed doors, is one of the things that I realized is that I desired him in a way that at 9 years old, you shouldn't be desiring a man or a relative. But when I wasn't getting attention from my mom or my dad or my grandparents, I would wait to get the attention from him, whatever that looked like. And I was conditioned that was love. The sex was love. The abuse was love. And they conditioned to take care of the abuser, right? So I am taking care of this person that abuses me but loves me. And so love is abuse. That's all I've ever known, right? So you have to teach kids by giving them another version of love. A lot of time, I remember the first youngest girl that I've worked with in a group home. It was the Dreamcatchers Foundation in LA, and she was 11 years old. She was pregnant, right? She didn't really want to talk to me at first. She was raped by her boyfriend's roommate, who was 18 at the time and living on his own. And I asked her, what do you dream of doing? And her things, I just want to finish middle school. And she just, her dream was to finish middle school. That was a big deal for her. And so I started to talk to her and tell her about my experiences and my story, bringing the humanity in. And I paid attention to her body language. She was very closed off. She was hunched over a little bit. Her tone was a bit soft. She didn't give me eye contact a whole lot. And sometimes have you ever heard of love bombing? Right? Sometimes you have to love bomb the kids a little bit, and that's kind of what I do. And I will say, I love you. And I know you don't know me, but I will love you until you tell me not to. And even if you don't love yourself, I will love you until you love yourself the way I love you. And I would ask for consent for affection, and I would say, you could be my daughter. Because I look at all of these kids as if they are my kids. I think I'm the mother of thousands of children. And so I was the first person, I didn't know until the instructor told me at the very end. She allowed me to hold her and hug her, and she sat on my lap, and I rocked her, and I shared my story with her, just a little bit of what I was doing at her age, and what I was feeling at her age, and what I had to realize in terms of what love was. And I had to explain that to her and say, you know, you never have to feel like you're going to be abandoned with love. You never have to feel like, and just started to explain to her what love was not. And then reintroduce what love is and the innocence of it and the compassion, gentle love, soft love, without any type of transaction attached to it. I can give you candy and you don't owe me anything. I can bake you a cake and you don't owe me anything. I can love you just because. I have a gift for you just because, right? And giving the affection, and it takes a little bit of time because they're not accustomed to that. They're accustomed to all things being transactional, and that's how I was. And I thought the only way I was going to get love is when the love that I was used to was waiting for my uncle to come back. And one of the things that I started to share was when he didn't come into the room, I would go in there. So when people say, well, kids ask for that, well, kids are conditioned to sexual acts as love. And they're not asking for sex, they're asking for love. The adult has conditioned them to think that this transaction is all that they are worthy of. And I felt a lot of shame when I started getting older, thinking that I manipulated my own uncle into having some type of sexual act with me, and I'm going to get in trouble. But if that's all you've ever known, it's going to take a little bit of time, consistency, right, and genuine love and care and compassion to show them a different way and unlearn that so that they recognize when they get older what type of consent they should be expected, to demand from anybody when they get older, and not be manipulated into any type of transactional care or love. Does that make sense? You're welcome.
Thank you.
So I'm Kelly. I'm a state prosecutor here, and I handle a lot of these cases. And first of all, I want to thank you so much for being so vulnerable and speaking to us, because I can't even fathom what you've been through, And we expect these kids to come in. We've met them only a few times and talk to us about this kind of stuff. And I learned a lot from what you said about being vulnerable. But how do I, like a girl from the suburbs, who's the worst thing that ever happened to me is I didn't make the varsity soccer team. You know what I'm saying? How do I become vulnerable with someone like that? Do you have any tips for how we should talk to these kids?
Do you have anybody that you know that's been through anything traumatic?
Yeah.
Right? And does it hurt you to know that happened to them?
Yeah.
And if you could do anything different, do you have an idea of what you would do different? Okay, so that's one tip. And I'll merge it in a second. Have you ever had your heart broken?
Yeah.
Right? Do you know what that feels like to have your heart broken, and then you're eating a quart of Haagen-Dazs or Ben & Jerry's and all in the feelings that come over you because heart hurts, right? Tap into that.
Okay.
Tap into the sensitivity and how you would have wanted somebody, especially if you got your heart broken and it wasn't your fault, right? And if there was anything tied to it to where, you've actively participated in the breaking of your own heart, right? And I always say that is sometimes we kind of do things to ourselves and we believe people who show us that they were a bad guy all the time, right? And so we don't want to say, I did this to myself, that we carry a little bit of shame. So you take the shame that you feel, that you don't want to feel. We don't want to be judged, right? Because we make a mistake. If I ever came to you and I say, if you can't make a mistake, what can you make? If you can't make a mistake, how will you learn, right? So take all of that into the room. Whatever she did, whatever the mistake, she's allowed to make them. She's afraid of shame. She's afraid of being judged. She feels like she participated in some of the harm that she's enduring for herself. She might not have experienced any type of safety, and we all know that hurt hurts. Right? So in that vulnerability, you might not be able to understand sexual assault, but you understand hurt. You understand abandonment. You understand shame and judgment and loneliness, right? So you go into it with yourself and tapping into your inner child. And sometimes I say, let your inner child talk to the child, right? How do you talk to your inner child? And one of the things that I do is I work with a lot of adults into tapping into their inner child, because we have a lot of adults with suppressed wounds that tend to lash out at these kids, not realizing that, you gotta heal your own wounds and tap into some of the brokenness in yourself that you haven't healed, because that's projecting onto these kids that we're trying to save, right? And that's the bringing the humanity and the vulnerability in when we're talking to them. Like, this could be my daughter. This could be me. And how would I want somebody to talk to me at whatever that age is, and tap into that.
Thank you, Kate.
That was really helpful.
We're going to take one more question, and then we're going to go to the panel, next panel discussion, if that's
Okay. Good morning, and thank you. You are wonderful. This was very, very helpful. Quick question though. You mentioned schools and your work in schools. We've had a hard time getting into schools to educate kids. And I'm curious, do you have advice, or can you give us some of the ways you are able to get into the schools? And are you using a specific curriculum at the schools?
I built my own curriculum because I went to Spelman, and I went to school for English and communication, so I'm naturally a writer. I went to USC for broadcast journalism, so I'm a talker. I started in the schools volunteering, right? And I started at my son's school at first. And what I did was I tried to figure out if there was a way that I could get the kids to kind of respond to me. And it really was just, I started out as a career day and just going in there and talking to the kids about my journey of success. And they were so enamored at the fact that, at the time I was, working at E! and NBC, and I worked with the Kardashians, and they were like, oh my God. But from where I was to how I got there, so that they don't glamorize Hollywood, but understand that there's a lot of work, but also teach them that there's some hope. And when I realized I can get their attention, I started to come back and volunteer more often, especially because the kids would ask me to come back. And I gained a little bit of the trust with the dean. And he said, the girls are like super focused lens on you. Maybe you should come back and talk to just the girls. And so going in there and talking to a lot of the girls and talking to them about, why are you in the tardy office? How come you're not asking questions about why you're in here, right? Trying to get an idea of the root cause of the behavior. Some of the kids didn't have uniforms, and some of the kids were going through stuff at home. So I realized there's a need here. And so I had a conversation with the principal and the assistant principal about coming back and just kind of working on the self-esteem, because those girls had never come back to the tardy line or the detention center, right? Because I validated them and I helped them and I let them know I see you and I will advocate for you. So I realized I saw a lot of me in a lot of the kids. I saw a lot of the girls trying to figure out what group they can be a part of and who can accept them. And I started to come back as much as possible. It started with word of mouth for the most part. The kids started to tell their parents, some of the teachers, that I have some kids in my class. Can I put them in your little 1 week thing that you do, or whatever it is that you do? I think that would be very beneficial for them. So I started to kind of meet a need that wasn't really talked about, that I think is actually important for all schools, to be honest. Because when you work on kids' belief systems and their mindset and their confidence building skills, communication skills, listening skills, how they talk to each other, how they communicate with adults, how they process information, that ends up spilling into their academic success. They have a lot of schools that teach to the test and teach to kids as a number, and I tell kids all the time, you're not defined by a letter in the alphabet, but by the effort that you put into yourself. And then they usually do really well. Sometimes public schools, I tend to have a hard time getting into public schools sometimes, because they'll say, you're a luxury, we don't have funding, we have to let the parents teach confidence skills and emotional intelligence skills and all of this stuff at home. Even puberty, teaching girls about their body, that's a part of my curriculum as well. And when they learn about their body and learn what they're going through, they don't look outside of themselves to get that information.
But for public schools that consider that a luxury, right, we have to go after grants. I have decided, let me just make it an organization and try to let them know I will get a grant to cover this program if you let me come into the schools. Private schools, unfortunately and unfortunately, private schools realize the value and the benefit, and they usually have the money to afford a team coming there and teaching their kids. I have a 10-week program that allows graduation, and they get a certificate afterwards. There's downloadable worksheets. It's a whole process. And I tell kids all the time, I'm here with you for as long as I can be with you. But I also make sure that I tell principals, if you want me to come in just one time, this might not work. You might not get the results that you're going to get, because kids have abandonment issues a lot of times. I had a DARE program. I don't know how many people, I'm going to tell my age, but I had a DARE program, and so they would come in and give a pep talk, and then they would leave, and you would never see them again. And I've had girls tell me, are you just going to come in here and you're going to leave? We're going to see you again. I was like, no, I'm here to stay. And then I had to prove it. I had to show the action behind the words that I am here for you. So if you're going to go into the schools and work with other organizations, you want to create a program that's long enough so that you can build relationship, let them know that you do care, and that you can show up multiple times to support them. And usually they open the floodgates and they start telling you all kind of stuff that's going on at home for the most part. But you have to be consistent. And the best way is to let, at the end of the day, your curriculum, and I have a nursing curriculum and a digital curriculum. It's a product that you're giving to kids. It's a product that you're giving to schools. And most people don't buy products, they buy solutions, right? And so you have to walk in and say, this is a problem that's going on in the world. This is a program that I want to bring to the school that will be helpful. And then be able to tell them how important and how valuable your work is going to be for their kids and for their school, and eventually for their overall academic success. And that you'll hit some walls a couple of times, because people will think it's not necessary, right? But for the teachers and for the principals and the deans and the administrators who understand that it takes a village, that they are part of the village, that the school is the village on top of the home, on top of the neighborhood. That is the village that comes together to take care and keep these kids safe. They will bring you in with absolute open arms. And I encourage that if you're going to build a curriculum, make sure that you build it where you have to go in at least 3 times or more, so that you can build rapport and relationship and trust with the kids, so that they can take the lesson in. Thank you.
Thank you for that information. All right, that was amazing, and I think answering inherent